Okay, I'd like to call us to order for our budget hearing meeting tonight for the Central School District 13J. So Superintendent or Business Manager, do you want to start with an overview of the process and where we stand and what our objectives are tonight?
Yep, we'll be glad to do that. Included in your packet on page number 4 is the notice of budget hearing that was published in the Itemizer Observer. And that is an explanation of the budget as approved by the Budget Committee. It includes the resources and requirements for all of our funds together, includes its FTE and the amount that was adopted or approved by the Budget Committee in order to contribute to our levy for general obligation bonds. In addition to that, there's a statement of indebtedness. It just shows other things other than general obligation bonds that the district has as debt, including our QSCAP bond and our bus leases. That's the information as adopted or approved by the Budget Committee and recommended for the board.
Okay, and then the first topic then is to have open public hearing for the budget. So we are now open for public hearing. Do we have any members of the public that are here tonight to share any comments?
No, we don't. We have our Budget Committee chair here, but he indicates he is not here for public comment.
We don't have any others online, and we don't have any others online.
And we received no other comment prior to this.
Did I see Rachel online on the meeting?
Rachel. I'm here, yes.
And Rachel, did you have any comments you wanted to share on behalf of the Budget Committee or as a public member of the public?
Some of my concerns that I mentioned probably would be best. I've got just a simple document from ODE that's just an example of some of my concerns. So I can send that as a link for review and maybe some later discussion or something like that.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for those comments and for sharing those thoughts earlier with us. Okay, so I think that brings us then to the business agenda.
So you just announced the close of the hearing.
Thank you, Cease. So we are now closed on the hearing part of the meeting, and we are now into the business agenda. So we have now budget adoption and appropriations as item number 1. So Cease, do you want to summarize that?
Yes, so between the publication of the approved budget by the Budget Committee and this meeting, we do have a couple of suggestions, recommendations that we would like the board to consider for adoption. There are 2 of them. They are included as pages. There's a summary on page 5 of your packet. Just 2 changes. One is to the general fund. I usually at this time of the end of June, we're really managing the cash flow, the ins, the outs, and finding up what our final payrolls are, which, because we are on a modified cash basis, which bills are coming due this month versus which we will have in July. So at this point, I'd like to increase the carry-in, the beginning fund balance of Fund 100 by $1.35 million. That literally is to take care of some of those bills that we look at paying out of the general fund and when those might come due. And by moving that into available revenue in 22-23, we have a couple of changes to the expense side of things. We had a request to add 1.5 FTE at the high school and 0.5 at Talmadge to increase electives and scheduling flexibility. And this money makes that possible. I think this money is fine on an ongoing basis. Those are ongoing expenses. But the request is temporary. I think we've had a request for 1 year for this extra FTE just to be able to help with their scheduling this year. And we made some small adjustments to supply line items, but also we're able to increase contingencies. We added back a negotiations line. Our negotiations with OSEA, Superintendent Kavista will update you on, but those negotiations overall are within budget. The negotiations with CEA are still in process. So we added money that would cover our most recent offer to them that is within our budget, to make it within our budget. We also were able to increase those sort of future-looking contingencies for curriculum and the PERS reserve. Again, not intended to spend those, but we have increased those items. And in the, you have another fund that's just kind of all the grants, donations, and student funds that are not enumerated somewhere else. And we added work days to one of the directors whose part of her time is in the special ed grant, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, the IDEA grant. And there is revenue to cover that. So that was another small increase to be able to manage into the next year. That created an overall change of less than 2% to the total budget. So we are asking you to consider those changes. And because of the amounts that are less than 10% in each of those funds, we are not required to hold a public hearing. This can be done by the board at adoption.
Okay, thank you, Cease. We do have in our package some proposed motions. What we can do, and I would recommend we do, is make a motion to approve the budget. You'll see that as motion number 1. And following the motion, then we can get into any further questions that you might have to the board members before we call the vote. So do I have a motion?
I'd be happy to make the motion. Just a quick clarification. Are we moving for approval of the budget as approved plus the changes presented?
Correct. So
Okay.
these motions would include the changes
The
as
1.97%.
I presented.
Okay. Was there a motion?
Second.
Yeah, motion 1, it's on page 10. It's the
Oh.
page number.
Oh.
In the packet I gave you.
Oh, I see. It's with,
Yep.
I got it. I'm with the program now. I move that the Board of Directors of Polk County School District Number 13J resolve to adopt the budget for fiscal year 2022-23 in a total amount of $71,005,875, now on file at the District Administration Office.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Darcy. Now let me open it up for any other questions or any questions from the board. Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, we have to go ahead and call the vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand.
We have 2 right hands in the room here as
Vidal
well.
and I are raising our right hand.
But only one left hand.
And it looks like we might have a non-board member.
Yeah, John, you don't need to vote at this point.
Yep.
You've done your work and now the board's taken it, but thank you for your
Appreciate
support.
the enthusiasm.
And thanks for checking in. too.
Yeah. Okay, that motion passes. That moves us on to motion number 2. Do I have a motion number 2?
And a reminder, the difference in dollar amount, motion 1 includes appropriated dollars plus unappropriated amounts that will be future reserves, such as the PERS reserve. And motion number 2 is only to appropriate those that we would have spending authority for in the coming year. Slightly different dollar.
I'll move that the Board of Directors of Polk County School District Number 13J resolve that the amounts shown below, $70,051,864 are hereby appropriated for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022 for the purposes shown below.
Thank you, Vidal. Do I have a
I'll
second?
gladly read them all if need be.
I second.
Thank you, Darcy. Let me open it up now to the board for any questions or clarifications. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of motion number 2 as presented, please raise your right hand.
And you have 2 ayes in the room, so that's 6-0.
Thank you. The motion passes.
And the backside or the next page.
Asich, you want to explain this particular motion?
Right, both motion 3 and motion 4 regard the taxes. One is our general fund ad valorem tax at our permanent tax rate, and the other amount is to pay our general obligation bonds. The motions are slightly different. One is for the amount, and the other one is called categorizing the taxes. Look pretty much exactly the same, but required by budget law to state them 2 different ways.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Do Vidal and I have to do all of them?
I think so.
Let me ask a question real quick.
Sure.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, this for motion number 2, this is what property taxes in our Monmouth Independence. This is what that's
Number
This
3.
goes
Number
toward
3.
Number 3.
or number 3. Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Monmouth Independence, our school district
School
boundaries.
district boundaries.
School.
So,
Okay, yeah.
of
School
course,
district
that includes
boundaries.
both cities. It
So like
includes-
when I have to pay my property tax at the end of the year, that's what this
You'll
this
have
is-
2 line items actually on your property taxes.
this is one of them.
One will be, well, you'll have 2 for the central school district.
Okay.
One will say central school district, and it will be this permanent rate, and that is used for the general fund only. The second line item will say central school district bonds after 2001, and that will be the amount, your portion of the $4 million.
So just to clarify for folks that might be watching or tune in later, when you say permanent, the permanent tax rate, this will never change, or is it permanent until we vote to change it again?
Correct. So on the first one, the amount that funds the general fund, that was the rate that was determined by the state when Measure 5, Measure 50 were voted in and
Okay.
put in the Constitution. We cannot increase that rate unless the Constitution of Oregon.
Right, so it's
is
not central
changed.
school district powers that be that are making this, just to clarify it to the
Yep.
public. Okay,
1993, they gave us
Correct.
that rate, and that's our rate.
all right, perfect.
And last year, we talked to the budget committee about lowering it, but that was the one where it had such minimal impact on any individual.
Right, I remember that.
But it had a larger impact because of all the large corporate
Okay,
land ownership in our school district.
I think that clarifies it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll
Good.
do it. I move that the Board of Directors of Polk County School District 13J resolve to impose ad valorem property taxes upon the assessed value of all taxable property within the district for the tax year 2022-23. Number one, at the permanent tax rate of $4.8834 per thousand of assessed value for operating purposes. And two, in the amount of $4,243,848 for the debt service on obligation bonds, on general obligation bonds, excuse me.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Darcy. And now let me open up any other questions. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of approving motion number 3 as presented, please raise your right hand.
And you have 2 ayes in the room. That's 6-0, Chair Love.
Great, thank you. That motion passes. Do we have a motion? Vidal.
Right, I mean,
Kidding,
we might as
kidding,
well keep
kidding.
it to the people over here on Fifth Street. I move that the Board of Directors of Polk County School District 13J resolve to categorize the taxes imposed for the purposes of Article 11, Section 11B as follows. Permanent rate tax subject to the education limit of $4.8834 per $1,000 of assessed value, and general obligation debt service bonds series 2013 and 2015 excluded from constitutional limits in the amount of $4,243,848 for debt service on general obligation bonds.
Thank you, Vidal. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Peggy. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of motion number 4, please raise your right hand.
You have 2 ayes in the room. That's 6-0.
Thank you, Cease. And that motion passes.
All right. Thank you. Our next item of business, as we look to the current budget year, again, this time of year, not only are we managing those sort of end fund balances to figure out how much money we'll be able to carry forward, but we're also looking at any supplemental budgets or budget transfers that we might need in order to finish out this year. So we do have several of those for you this evening, and those start on page 12, which is the actual resolution. But I can explain each of those if you'd like.
Yeah, please. And I think also in the first part of our package, we have the proposed motions, right? So you can look either in the first package or on pages 12 through 16. Is that correct?
No, the motions are on pages 1 through 3. You're right, on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have pages 12 through 16.
I don't have that.
Oh,
either.
you don't have those, sorry. Yeah, you don't.
Okay.
The printout copies here don't have
Okay, we've got the motions.
the
we just
picture.
have-
You don't
We don't
have,
even have
you
the
have the
motion.
explanation. and
We
you
have the-
have motion. You just don't
Yeah, and
have.
it was also
this
in the
little-
Friday report. So
Yeah.
C said send it to you, and then
I'm
we
pulling
just
it up on the.
added it in there just as a reminder.
I've seen it, I just didn't see it here.
It's basically the same thing though, see. So if we just look at page
Looks like
1
this.
and
The first one actually is one you've looked at already, already this year, and that is our special revenue fund. Again, this is a lot of small grants, donations, and student fees. And as we went through the year, we made a slight adjustment to this, but what we did not account for was the final allocation we received for our ESSER fund. And that was a rather significant amount, but also for the student investment account. So we have actually, when we submitted our ESSER 2 plan, we got more money than we anticipated last spring. And we received our full allocation for ESSER 3. Most of that will be spent in the coming 2 years, but there were a couple of items in our ESSER 3 plan we were able to take advantage of. For example, a new smaller vehicle for transporting homeless migrant students. That was actually in our ESSER 3 plan. We were able to get that ordered and get that in this year. So that money was not included last spring. So the request is to actually move to increase that appropriation for all of those smaller funds to by $904,400. That is still under the threshold of 10% of the original appropriated amount, which was $9,611,275. So this is allowed by board action.
Thank you, Cease. Do I have a motion?
Sure. I move to approve the supplemental budget in the amount of $904,400 to the special revenue fund as presented.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Darcy. Any other questions for Cease? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand.
2 ayes in the room, 6-0.
6-0, that motion passes. Back to you, Cease.
We have a couple of things in our capital projects fund, and this is the fund that is funded by our Construction Excise Tax this year to deal with growth in enrollment and a lot of the additional work going on in our buildings. We have been able to make some purchases of portable for Ash Creek Elementary. We were also able to move one of our portables from the annex. And we have, again, we have some bills that look like they will come in the current year instead of waiting till July. If I get those and want to pay them, I would need additional appropriations for that. There are actually 2 actions here, and that is because of budget law. We had already taken some money out of the contingency to purchase these portables and put a down payment on a portable for Independence Elementary. Budget law only allows us to take 15% of the contingency. So we had $800,000 in contingency. We can't transfer that all by board action. So I am requesting to take $28,750, the remaining amount, out of contingency and move it up into the expenditure line in order to take the allowable amount, 15%, out of contingency without a public hearing. So that's one action. And then the second one be a separate motion, which is to create a supplemental budget for the balance of what I think we're going to need to write a check for before June 30th.
Okay, thanks, Cease. Do I have a motion?
I can't find the page, so.
This is the top
It's up on.
Page 2.
on your budget,
page
or
2.
on your agenda, page 2.
This is the 28,750, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
I move to approve the transfer from contingency in the amount of $28,750 in the capital projects fund as presented.
Thank you, Byron. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Don. Any questions? All in favor of the motion as presented, please raise your right hand.
And you have 2 ayes in the room, 6-0.
That motion passes. I think
So the
Cease has
other-
already covered this one, so do I have another motion?
The other half of that is the final 20. It'll get us through the end of the year.
I move to approve the supplemental budget in the amount of $20,000 capital projects fund as presented.
Thank you, Byron. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Peggy. Any questions? All in favor of the motion as presented, please raise your right hand.
You have 2 ayes in the room.
And that motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. The next one is actually our greenhouse fund. You started a new fund for construction of a greenhouse at Central High School. They have really done a great job of bringing in grants, and they have, again, some of their vendors who've been able to move up their timeline because they have the revenue in hand. So it looks like I have about another $14,000 worth of bills to pay before the end of the week. This is under the threshold of 10% of the original appropriated amount of 143.5. So this change in appropriation and supplemental budget is allowed by board action.
Thank you, Cease. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the supplemental budget in the amount of $14,000 to the CHS Greenhouse Capital Project Fund as presented.
Thank you, Peggy. Do I have a second?
Second it.
Thank you, Don. Any questions for Cease?
So just a quick question. So did I understand you correctly? This is funded by additional grant funds that they've gotten?
Right,
Okay.
they received the original amount we went by was based on their grant from Oregon Department of Ed. They received their full $100,000 ask from Spirit Mountain. So part of it we're spending now, the rest of it is already included in next year's budget. Plus a lot of other small grants they keep getting.
Great, good question. Any other questions? Okay, I'll ask for a vote now. All in favor of the CHS Greenhouse Capital Project motion, please raise your right hand.
You have 2 ayes in the room, 6-0.
Thank you, 6-0. The motion passes.
All righty, this is the last time I'm going to ask you this fiscal year, I promise. The food service fund. We thought we were gonna make it. I'm not sure if we will. Again, we've got the bills yet to pay for the end of the year here. This request is for another $100,000 in appropriations. Hoping I don't have to pay that much, but in fact, that's what we're requesting. This is not actually new money. This is a transfer of appropriation from the general fund. It's not the general fund paying food service. Food service has the revenue already to be able to make these expenditures because, as I've mentioned, the higher reimbursement rate. This is you just saying, don't spend it in the general fund. It's okay to spend it over here in food service because the general fund, we have plenty of appropriation availability. And then this is allowed by board action. Because you'd already appropriated it once. We're just moving the other one.
Moving it again.
Okay, thank you, Cease. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve. Go ahead, Vidal.
I move to approve the appropriation transfer in the amount of $100,000 from the general fund to the food service fund as presented.
Thank you, Vidal. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Peggy. Any other questions? All in favor of the motion as presented, please raise your right hand.
And 2 ayes in the room.
Darcy, you still there?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. I had to answer a phone call. My grandpa's sick.
No problem. Did you hear the vote or the call on that motion?
No, I'm really sorry.
Okay, so the motion passes 5-0. with
Okay.
1 abstain.
Okay.
And just so you know, that brought the total appropriations in food service to almost 1.7 million. you just adopted a budget for next year where food service is at 2.01 million. So hopefully we won't be going through this next year. Hopefully those food prices will be manageable.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing to
Stay
remember.
within the budget.
And I think that's a key thing to remember. We had, as we started this process, there are concerns that prices are going to and have, or we have seen that, and we know that that will probably continue for a period of time.
So you'll probably still get to do it.
I might still get to do it next year, but they have enough revenue and hope they should be able to cover it. We're still not really thinking we will have to transfer from the general fund, but we'll see. Thank you for those. And our last item of business, hopefully this evening, the construction excise tax. Each year, the Oregon Department of Revenue releases an indexed amount that school districts can charge. And historically, Central School District has implemented those rates to be charged on new residential or non-residential properties, either new construction or additions of habitable usable space. So if somebody adds a garage, they don't pay a construction excise tax. And there are a variety of exemptions for that the district can and does grant. And included in your packet, besides the letter from the Department of Revenue showing what those rates are, is my analysis of sort of where that money has been spent over the years since the district began collecting it.
Thank you, Cease. Do I have a motion?
I move to adopt the Department of Revenue index tax rate limits for construction excise tax for the fiscal year 2022-23 to be effective July 1st, 2022.
Thank you, Peggy. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Don. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as presented, please raise your right hand.
Two in the room, vote aye.
That motion passes.
Well, that was fun.
Thank you all. It was more fun for me to prepare them for your consideration, believe me.
Thank you, Cease, for all your hard work on our upcoming year's budget and helping us to steer our way to meeting our budget goals this year. So appreciate all your work. So with that,
There'll be multiple pages for your signature, Chair Love, when you get a chance to visit the district office.
Yep. Okay, we are actually going to meet in executive session. So let me go through the announcement of that. The Central School District 13J Board will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660(2)D, which allows the board to meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated to carry on labor negotiations. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All of the members of the audience are asked to leave the room, both physical and virtual, and exit the online meeting. Representative of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room and reopen the meeting to the public. It is not anticipated that there will be a decision made at the end of the executive session this evening. So we are adjourned from our budget hearing and now in executive session. We'll take a minute to make sure that we have the appropriate audience online and in the room. Thank you all.